Welcome back. We're diving deep today into how wages and employment have been changing, especially with all the talk about technology and globalization.
Yeah, it's a pretty big topic.
And you want more than just those basic economic models, right?
Right.
Our source today actually suggests that the traditional skilled versus unskilled way of looking at labor, well, it might be too simple.
Interesting.
So we're going to explore that together and see what we can learn.
It's fascinating how this source challenges that standard model, especially when it tries to explain why some workers haven't really benefited from this idea that we need more skilled labor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we're always told that higher education should lead to higher wages with the so-called college premium.
Right. Makes sense.
But if you look at the data from our source, it covers a pretty long period from 1963 to 2008, and it shows some things that don't quite fit that story.
Yeah, the source points out that real wages for some groups actually went down during those years.
Oh.
Down. Specifically for less educated male workers.
Hmm.
And then there's this whole trend of job polarization, where both high-wage and low-wage jobs are growing, but those middle-skill jobs, they're shrinking.
Yeah, we hear about that a lot.
It's not something the traditional model can really explain.
So it seems like something more complicated is happening, right?
Definitely.
This is where the source's task-based model comes in.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of just focusing on skill levels, it looks at the specific tasks a worker actually does.
I see.
So the source breaks it down into three categories of tasks: abstract, routine, and manual.
Okay. Can you give me some examples?
Sure, abstract tasks are things like problem solving, being creative, communication.
So like managers, analysts,
Exactly. Routine tasks are more repetitive, easily defined.
like data entry, some kinds of factory job.
And manual tasks.
Mm.
These require, well, physical skill, and being adaptable.
Okay, I get it.
So how does this task-based model explain what we're seeing in the job market?
Well, the source argues that technology, things like automation and offshoring, they've really hit those routine tasks the hardest.
Right, because a lot of those middle-skilled jobs that people used to do, now machines can do them.
Or they've been moved overseas. So that explains why those middle skill jobs are declining.
Makes sense. Like technology is changing what kind of work is even out there.
Exactly. Now think about those high-paying and low-paying jobs that are both on the rise.
Okay.
The source connects that to those other two task categories, abstract and manual.
So abstract tasks are more in demand now?
Yeah, the demand for them has grown a lot, which benefits highly educated workers, the ones who are good at thinking critically and solving tough problems.
Those are your high-wage jobs.
Right. But it's not just high-skill jobs. The source also talks about this interesting trend. More non-routine manual tasks are needed.
Non-routine manual.
These are jobs where you need to be adaptable. You can't just program a robot to do it.
And you have to actually interact with people.
Exactly. Things like personal care services, cooking, other service sector roles.
That's where we're seeing growth in those areas,
Right.
Even though some low-skilled jobs are disappearing.
Right. It seems like the specific type of task is a big factor in whether a job is going to last with all these technological changes happening.
We should think about what skills are going to be valuable in the future.
Absolutely. The source actually looked at how occupations have become a better predictor of wages over time
A better predictor
than just having a certain level of education. Their findings suggest that specializing in specific tasks is becoming more important than ever before.
So it's not just about having a degree, it's about what you can actually do with it.
Right. Precisely. They used data from the U.S. Census and the American Community Survey to show this. Occupation now explains wage differences better than education levels alone. This shift really highlights how valuable it is to specialize in certain tasks.
This task-based model is really painting a clearer picture of what's happening. But how does the source actually test these ideas?
Well, they use data from a few different sources, including the Current Population Survey, the Census, and even the Dictionary of Occupational Titles.
The dictionary.
Yeah, along with a newer database called WONET. These resources have lots of detailed information about the tasks involved in different jobs and how those tasks have changed over time.
Wow. So they're not just looking at overall trends, they're digging into how work is changing within specific occupations.
Exactly. They break down the data by occupation, education level, gender, even experience level.
So looking at every angle.
This detailed approach reveals nuances that the traditional model might miss. For example, while the overall college premium has gone up, the source shows that it's much more significant for certain age groups.
So it seems like experience and what generation you belong to also make a difference.
Right. A college degree doesn't guarantee the same outcome for everyone.
And this is where the power of the task-based model really shines.
It does.
By looking at how specific tasks within occupations have changed, we can see that it's not just about education as a measure of earning potential.
Right.
Take clerical work as an example.
Okay.
With the rise of computers, some tasks have been automated, while others require new skills like data analysis or software proficiency.
Yeah, so it's not just that jobs are disappearing, it's that the nature of those jobs is changing.
And that, of course, affects wages.
Exactly. The source provides a framework to understand why some workers see stagnant or declining wages, while others experience significant gains, even within the same broad occupational category.
So the skills that were valuable in an office environment before might not be in such high demand now, and new skills are emerging that command higher wages.
That's right. This challenges the idea that simply getting more education is the solution to wage inequality.
Because the quality and relevance of that education, that's what matters, right?
Precisely. It needs to align with the changing demands of the labor market.
This task-based model really has implications for how we think about education, skills development, even career planning.
Absolutely. Understanding these trends can help people make more informed decisions about their career paths.
Like a roadmap for the job market.
Exactly. By understanding how technology, tasks, and skills are all connected, people can better position themselves for success in today's economy.
It's all really fascinating, but I'd love to dive into some specific examples that the source uses to illustrate the power of this task-based model.
Sure. They offer a compelling case study using data on occupations in the U.S. They group these occupations into 8 categories: managerial, professional, technical, sales, office and administrative, production, operative, and service.
And they track how employment in each of these categories has changed over time, right?
Exactly. Between 1979 and 2007, employment in high-skill occupations like professional, managerial, and technical roles grew substantially.
Makes sense.
Meanwhile, middle-skill occupations like sales, office, and administrative support and production jobs, they saw a significant decline.
Which aligns with that idea of routine tasks being automated or offshored. But what about those service occupations? Weren't those low-skill jobs also increasing?
Yes, and that's a key observation. While some low-skill jobs did decline, service occupations defied that trend, experiencing rapid growth, particularly from the 1980s onward. This supports the argument that non-routine manual tasks are gaining importance.
And it's interesting how they break it down further, looking at trends within each category.
Yes.
For example, within service occupations, they saw rapid growth in jobs like food preparation and serving, cleaning and janitorial work, and personal care services.
Right.
These are jobs that require adaptability and in-person interaction, making them harder to automate.
And that's a crucial distinction. It's not just about the skill level of the job, but the nature of the tasks involved. Jobs that require flexibility, problem solving, and human interaction are likely to be more resilient to automation.
So the source isn't just saying that robots are going to take over all the jobs. They're showing how demand for certain types of skills is actually going up.
Absolutely. And to test this further, they even analyzed whether these employment shifts were driven by changes in industry composition.
What does that mean?
For example, did the decline in manufacturing jobs simply lead to a decline in production occupations?
So, like, was it the industry itself that was shrinking?
Exactly.
What did they find?
Their analysis shows that changes in industry composition weren't the main driver.
Huh.
Instead, they found that within industries, there was a shift away from middle-skill occupations and towards both high-skill and low-skill occupations. This supports the idea that it's the task content of jobs rather than just the industry that's driving these changes.
So even within manufacturing, the jobs that are left require more skills, while the more routine tasks are being done by machines. And in other industries, the need for those non-routine manual tasks is what's driving the growth in service jobs.
Precisely. And this has major implications for wages. As the market value of certain tasks changes, so do the wages that go with those tasks.
Right, if the tasks you're good at are in high demand, you're likely to get paid more. But if your skills are focused on tasks that are being automated or offshored, you might see your wages stay the same or even go down.
Exactly. It's a very different way of looking at things compared to just focusing on supply and demand for skilled versus unskilled labor.
This brings us to another interesting point the source raises: the growing importance of occupations when it comes to figuring out wages.
Right. They found that over time, your occupation has become a stronger predictor of your wages than just how much education you have.
So knowing what someone does for a living gives you a better idea of how much they earn than just knowing how many years of school they completed.
Exactly. They provide some compelling evidence for this using data from the U.S. Census and the American Community Survey. They found that the ability of occupation to explain wage differences has increased significantly over time, while the explanatory power of education alone has declined.
Which makes sense if we think about how tasks are becoming more specialized and the value of those tasks is shifting.
And to further support this, they compared the explanatory power of occupations to the task-based model we've been discussing.
Okay.
They found that measures of task intensity, such as the amount of abstract, routine, or manual tasks involved in a job, have become even stronger predictors of wages than occupations themselves.
Wow. So knowing the specific tasks that someone does in their job gives you the most accurate picture of how much they're likely to earn. This really reinforces the idea that the task-based model is a powerful way to understand the labor market.
It does. And the source then explores how this model can help us understand not just wage differences between skill groups, but also the overall wage inequality within those groups.
So not all college graduates earn the same, and not all high school dropouts are stuck in low-paying jobs.
Exactly. The source argues that by looking at the distribution of tasks within each skill group, we can get a more nuanced understanding of wage inequality.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine that technological change leads to a decline in the value of certain tasks that are disproportionately performed by less educated workers.
Okay.
We would expect to see rising inequality within that group.
Because some less educated workers might be in jobs where their skills are still in demand, while others are being displaced by automation. That would create a wider gap in earnings.
Precisely. And the task-based model helps us understand how these dynamics play out in a way that the traditional model simply can't.
It seems like this model has a lot of potential to explain the complexities of the modern labor market. But the source doesn't stop there, do they? They also look at some even more nuanced and interesting aspects of the relationship between technology, tasks, and wages.
That's right. They acknowledge that the model we've discussed so far takes the comparative advantage of different skill groups in performing certain tasks as given. But in reality, this comparative advantage can evolve over time.
So the types of tasks that different skill groups are best suited for aren't necessarily fixed. They can change as technology advances and the nature of work evolves.
Exactly. The source gives a really interesting example of this. Imagine a technological advancement that makes it easier to automate routine tasks in a particular occupation.
Okay.
This would initially lead to a decline in the demand for medium-skilled workers who specialize in those tasks.
That's what we've been discussing so far. But what happens next?
The source suggests that this decline in demand could actually encourage medium-skilled workers to invest in developing skills in either more abstract or more manual tasks. In other words, they adapt to the changing demands of the labor market by shifting their specialization.
So instead of just losing their jobs, they find new areas where their skills are valuable. That's a much more hopeful perspective.
It is, and it highlights the importance of adaptability and lifelong learning in this changing world of work. The source also points out that this process of adaptation can be influenced by things like education policies, training programs, and even cultural norms.
So it's not just about individual workers adapting, it's also about society, providing the support and opportunities for them to do so.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of the source's analysis, the role of endogenous technology.
Endogenous technology, what's that?
It means that technological advancements aren't just happening on their own. They're often influenced by the supply and demand for different types of skills. In other words, changes in the labor market can actually shape what kinds of technologies are developed.
So it's like a feedback loop. The skills that are available in the workforce can influence what kinds of technologies are invented and adopted.
Precisely. And this adds another layer of complexity to the task-based model. The source gives a hypothetical example to illustrate this. Imagine a situation where there's a big increase in the supply of highly educated workers.
Let's say there's a sudden boom in college graduates.
Right. This increase in supply could actually lead to a decrease in the relative wages of those workers. But here's the interesting part. This wage pressure could then encourage firms to invest in developing new technologies that complement the skills of those highly educated workers.
So instead of just driving down wages, the abundance of skilled labor could actually lead to innovation that creates new opportunities for those workers.
Exactly. And this could lead to a shift in the types of tasks that are performed by different skill groups. Tasks that were previously considered too complex or expensive to automate might suddenly become feasible with new technologies and a skilled workforce to operate them.
It's like the availability of a certain skill set can create its own demand by driving technological innovation.
Precisely. And this highlights how the relationship between technology, tasks, and skills is much more dynamic and interconnected than the traditional model suggests.
It seems like the source is building a very compelling argument for why we need to look at tasks, not just skills, when we're analyzing the labor market.
They are, and to explore this further, they even try to use real-world data to see if changes in the market value of tasks actually lead to changes in wages for the groups of workers who specialize in those tasks.
So they're testing their ideas against real-world data.
Exactly, and their approach is pretty smart. They use data from the U.S. Census to group workers into three categories based on whether they initially specialized in abstract, routine, or manual tasks.
Okay, so three groups of workers.
Right. And then they track how the wages of these groups have changed over time relative to changes in the overall wage structure.
So they're basically seeing if workers who specialize in tasks that are becoming more valuable actually see their wages increase and vice versa.
Precisely. And while they acknowledge that this is just a preliminary analysis, the results are quite interesting. They find that from the 1980s onward, the groups of male workers who specialized in abstract tasks saw a significant increase in their relative wages.
Which fits with the idea that abstract tasks were becoming more valuable in the market.
Exactly.
And what about the other groups?
Interestingly, they found that male groups specializing in manual tasks also saw an increase in their relative wages, though this trend emerged a bit later.
So that supports the idea that demand for non-routine manual tasks was also increasing. What about the groups that specialized in routine tasks?
As you might expect, those workers saw a decline in their relative wages, particularly starting in the 1980s. This is consistent with the idea that routine tasks were being displaced by automation and offshoring.
So the data seems to support the predictions of the task-based model.
It does, at least in this initial analysis, and the source emphasizes that this is really just a starting point for further research. They suggest that future studies could explore these trends in more detail, using more advanced statistical techniques and data from different countries.
It sounds like there's a lot more to learn in this area. This task-based model offers a powerful new way to understand how technology, tasks, and skills are all connected and how they shape the labor market.
It does. And as we continue to try to understand the impacts of automation, globalization, and all the rapid technological changes happening, this model provides valuable insights for policymakers, educators, and individuals alike. This deep dive is really highlighting how this task-based model gives us a much deeper understanding of the labor market than that traditional skilled versus unskilled way of thinking.
It definitely helps us move beyond just broad skill levels and look at the specific tasks that are driving what happens with wages and employment.
It's like using a magnifying glass to see all the intricate details that shape how individuals are affected.
And speaking of details, the source even touches on how this model could help us understand offshoring better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, moving jobs to other countries. It's often portrayed as just companies looking for cheaper labor.
Right.
But the task-based model suggests it's more complicated than that.
How?
Well, the source emphasizes that offshoring, like automation, is more likely to impact tasks that are routine or codifiable, meaning tasks that can be easily explained with instructions and done remotely.
So it's not about offshoring entire jobs, but specific tasks within those jobs.
Exactly. And just like with automation, this can lead to a change in the types of tasks that are done domestically.
Potentially leading to more jobs that require abstract or non-routine manual skills.
Right. It seems like this task-based model is really versatile for understanding all sorts of labor market trends.
It really is. And the source emphasizes that this is just the beginning, There's so much more research that could be done.
Go ahead.
They're calling for more studies to really test the model's predictions and see how it applies across different countries and industries.
It's like they've given us this whole new way of looking at work and how it's changing.
Absolutely.
And by understanding these trends, we can hopefully prepare ourselves and future generations for what's to come.
Definitely.
It seems like this model isn't just for academics, though, right?
Oh, definitely not. It's relevant for policymakers, people in education, and really anyone who's thinking about their career.
Because it gives us a better idea of what skills will be needed in the future.
Exactly. It can help shape education and training programs, guide career decisions, and even help policymakers address things like wage inequality.
So we're not just talking about getting more education, but getting the right kind of education, the kind that's actually useful in the changing job market.
Exactly. And recognizing that this whole interplay between technology, the tasks we do, and the skills we have, it's complicated. It's not simple.
No, it's not. This deep dive has really shown that. We need to move beyond those overly simplistic explanations and really grapple with how complex the labor market is becoming.
I agree.
But by understanding these dynamics, we can make smarter choices about our own careers. And hopefully policymakers can create better strategies for economic growth.
Right.
And we can prepare future generations for all the challenges and opportunities ahead.
I think that's a great point to end on.
It really has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and keep exploring those deep ideas.